This is the Weigh-In Podcast by Ben Wad Chestnut and the occasional pop-in Sebastian Romero. On this week's Takedown Thursday, the video you all have been waiting for, we've got a lot of messages on this one. The breakdown of whether if Bo Bassett wrestles Caldwell at Real American Freestyle, what does it look like for his eligibility? And this is the question you've all asked us, and I do have to put the disclaimer out to start that, everything is technically speculation. We're going to try to bring as many facts as we can here as we have this stuff, but the difference is, again, nothing here is official. So please understand that nothing here is official. It's not official anything said. It's just facts and findings on what we believe in our investigation. But nonetheless, that is this week's weigh-in. So we jump right into this one on this week's weigh-in. So we're going to jump off by getting you started. We got all our notes for this. We're ready to go. So we're going to do a lot of reading, but we're also going to be getting into how we feel. A prospect student athlete at the Division I or the Division II must receive a final amateurism certification from the NCAA's Eligibility Center before competing. So just to basically get you in that, if many of you don't know, they have to be proven eligible from the Eligibility Center, which is why, if it were to come out, it's going to come out on his way up, going in to getting his eligibility. If it's possible, it happens. Amateur status means the athlete has not engaged in certain professional type of activities. For example, A, signing a contract to play professional athletics, receiving pay or other actual necessary expenses for athletic participation, competing on a professional team. So, yeah, people can say Real American is not really a team, but it is professional. It is professional, so it kind of does fall under, but we'll get to it. Specifically under bylaw 12026, a professional athletic team is one that provides a player more than actual and necessary expenses for participation. The rule emphasizes you are not eligible for participation in a sport if you have ever taken pay or promise of pay for competing in that sport. Also, for sports like wrestling, if you compete with or against professionals in a professional environment in your Colgate sport, your amateur status may be impacted. So this is what these are the notes that I wrote in regards to this. The NCAA's amateurism rules have evolved specifically with NIL deals, but the core pay for play concept remains central. So this is just my little notes. So for Bo, who's aspiring to wrestle at the Colgate level, likely full style under NCAA institution, if the event with Real American Freestyle is considered professional paid or under contract that resembles pro status, eligibility risk still exists. So I've got a few scenarios for you that I've clearly put down here to help you get it. So what happens if Bo signs a professional type contract with Real American Freestyle and receives pay beyond reimbursement expenses or a stipend to compete in the match under the auspices of Real American Freestyle, which is a promotion paying athletes? And this can occur in a sport, wrestling/freestyle, wrestling, which is the same or subconsciously the same as his Colgate sport. So basically, this is what I've come down to. If he receives a guarantee of share of gate, TV revenue, or appearance fee from RAF for his wrestling, the contract defines him as a professional or prohibits him from participating as an amateur elsewhere. That's another possible thing that could go. Payment for performance, not simply travel or basic expense reimbursement. The trigger is paid for play. So basically paying him to go in a match against Wardwell, if he's making X amount of dollars, we're kind of, by what we've been able to gather and reach out to for our friends of the weigh-in, we are the mentors of the weigh-in. Yeah, they say that this would be a loss of eligibility here right now. This would any of these things that I've just labeled um would be lost. The event is organized by a team or promotion that pay. This one doesn't really apply, but we jotted it down that pays athletes more than the more expenses. We talked about this, but it's a promotion and it's a promotion. Um, but what I put here, professional athletics team or organization under bylaws 12026, the bylaws there, as I brought that up earlier, this is clear that if we're in this like I like to call scenario one, you're to toe the line of the eligibility loss here. Um, and because of this, the NCAA may determine he has to forfeit his amateur status in that sport, but really in wrestling. The bylaws only go to that sport. So, for instance, if somebody was to play another sport, it's kind of looking like, from what I've been able to gather, this is, again, I don't say this is official, but I've been able to gather that you would lose the eligibility in that sport that you have gone professional. Um, and why would those, that scenario one matter is because if he loses his amateur status, he won't be cleared by the eligibility center. So the eligibility center, it would leave a bunch of hearings. The eligibility center would almost indefinitely say, hey, you know, um, something's not right here. Something's not right here. And if anything of that nature is going to take place, they'll probably wait till after the event would have taken place. Because if you do it before, you can kind of go, well, oh, he never really went professional, he never wrestled. So it would likely take place after would any argument. And I know everybody talked about. I know we had this talk on here about Gable Steveson and the Olympics, and I said, well, you should be able to be an Olympic champ in that. Gable Steveson was a totally different situation. Gable Steveson, there wasn't no real American freestyle, where you have real American freestyle, which is a promotion out here that's paying. You got former NCAA All-Americans, champions, even on this promotion, wrestling. This is, so I would say it's as best as professional as it gets. So I've jotted down a scenario two here, which is scenario number two. So for all of you that want to know, this is scenario two, which I kind of called it the eligibility preserved. So what happens if both participates in Real American Freestyle or a similar event, but under the conditions that maintain amateur status per NCAA rules? He does not sign a contract that designates him as a professional athlete. So as long as the contract still says he's amateur, he's collegiate. That's the word I'm looking for, collegiate. Um, collegiate, that he's still collegiate, or prohibits, which is good, and also that does not prohibit amateur participation elsewhere. So in terms of that saying, hey, you can't participate any other where than here, obviously that is not the case, because we've seen Real American Freestyle people compete in such things like Olympics and other stuff, but still, if it says that he can't compete with another promotion, it all depends. If he receives only actual necessary expenses, travel, lodging, meals, or reimbursement for them, no payment for performance. This is consistent with NCAA allows for amateurs. So basically, he can compete. Like, he can compete. He just can't be paid to compete. So you say, okay, the winner, he's going in there, and the winner may get, $40,000, for instance, out of the event. Then the problem here is, okay, he's being paid to play, in a sense, and you can't really do that. You can be given expenses, but you can't really be paid to be there in that event, and you can't. You really can't. But as we know, rules are starting to surface and change. But this is as what I've been able to gather so far. But this is just what we're talking about. So the event is organized so that he is considered an amateur competitor, not a pro. The promotion does not treat him as a paid athlete beyond the expenses. So obviously, as we all know, they're going to say, oh, they're going to fixate the numbers and say the reimbursement. I'm not saying this is ever actually going to take place, but in some cases, you would see the event try to line it up so the athlete can still, you know, be able to go to NCAA. And I'm not saying Real American Freestyle is doing this, but I'm saying in any what situation, I'm saying in a hypothetical, you know, you could say, well, oh, he spent this or that. I mean, stuff like this it happens. Is it common? No. I don't nor see a promotion saying, hey, we're gonna pay him more money, but say, oh, his travel costed more than it did. I don't see north of that, but that is also another situation where, you can kind of start getting in trouble, in trouble both ways, saying, because this is you want to be able to allow the NCAA to be welcoming of this, having NCAA guys compete over at Real American Freestyle. But what we don't want is this situation to not go well in the NCAA bar their athletes from competing over there, and then you have a problem. So, I say that competition is outside of his collegiate season if enrolled, and does not conflict with his uh, college commitment or responsibility. I don't think that'll be a problem. There's guys that compete with that one. I don't think that'll be coming anything like that because there are guys that compete in world tournaments and do a lot of stuff. I think it's okay. So, my end result here, I said Bo retains his NCAA status in wrestling, thus remains eligibility for Division I, Division II competition. When he enrolls, he would still need his amateurism certification, but no disqualifying professionalism marks exist in scenario 2. So why does it matter? I'm going to give you the why it matters once again. It allows him to gain experience, exposure, and prize prize money structured as allowable expenses only if reimbursement still yet remains eligible, but it requires extreme careful structuring. So that's kind of what what it is, where you're not paid specifically to compete, but you're in an event, like I said, prize money structured. And I got my third scenario here for you guys. So this I called it the gray area, risky, unclear. This is what I brought together. What happens? Some elements look professional, others possibly comply with amateur rules, but the status is uncertain and would depend on the details. The NCAA review, the institution's compliance officer, and procedures. And I say this typically factors in the gray zone or the gray area, like I like to call it. Both signs an agreement with Real American Freestyle that may or may not contain exclusive payment beyond expenses or other pro style conditions. He receives some prize money or compensation that is more than the actual necessary expense, but is unclear whether the NCAA will view as a pay for performance. The event is ill labeled amateur, but has characteristics of professionalism, media rights, sponsorship, athlete compensation, or some of the things I jotted there. The timing, perhaps he competes before enrolling in college or competes in a freestyle event while still in high school or a gap year, which might affect how the NCAA views the event. The type of competition, if the sport he competes in freestyle is different from his intended college sport folk style, there may be more room for argument. Some NCAA rules indicate that participating professionally in one sport may not affect eligibility in a different sport. So I came up with some results here. The NCAA might flag this case for review. He might receive a conditional certification, or be required to sit out a season or lose partial eligibility. The outcome depends heavily on the contract language, compensation amount, the nature of the event, the athlete's intent, and how the promotion classifies its athletes. Why it matters, because many modern promotional events, especially in combat sports, freestyle, wrestling, MMA, blur the lines between amateur and professionalism. Prize money, sponsorships, media deals, etc. If Bo enters that gray area without proper legal or compliance review, he risks unintended loss of eligibility or needing a waiver. Now, what I did jot here was if he redshirts his first year, he avoids any problem of losing a year because you're redshirting. So you're burning the red shirt, which they always say instead to lose a year, you can burn your red shirt, which is still really a really good thing. So what I talked about here, I built a table summary just to bring this back. Uh, payment in the lost eligibility, I said payment beyond expenses for performance. Event nature, I labeled here clearly professional event slash promotion in the same sport. Loss eligibility would be the eligibility outcome. But I'm one thing that I said here on the side was it is freestyle versus folk, so it's a different style. So it's going to be interesting to how they view it because it is. But I guess you got to say the difference is if you view that as professional, I know it's separate compliances, but then how do you look at it on the woman's side? Then would real American freestyle have to put on a a folk style for the women so they don't get a compliance issue either? Real interesting. But preserved. I said the preserved scenario here. I jotted down back to the preserved. No pro contract, only expense reimbursement, no pay for performance. Amateur event, no pro designation, perhaps outside collegiate season. That's kind of we're gonna say here eligibility preserved. Gray area. Some payment slash prize money, ambitious contract language, event in a mixed zone. Uh, Event may have professional trapping, sport may differ slightly, or timing ambitious. Eligibility uncertain, review required. So I kind of put there that there will be a review required if it's in that, you know. The recommendations here, I would say, is to just really make sure that you get with a NCAA compliant or eligibility center to make sure anything that happens with a real American freestyle does not put you out of eligibility because this whole thing here, um, yeah. So my final notes, I am instructed to say this. I am not a legal or NCAA compliance advisor, so that does not substitute for professional counsel. The NCAA rules are detailed and can hinge on wording and fact pattern, but hopefully what I've gave you a clear structure, briefing you on the use and can kind of give you what and just to understand so that you can understand some of the stuff. Um, and that's one thing that I brought forth for you to bring here. And this the point of this was not to say, wow, like Poe's not going to be eligible. The same thing with Gable. And Gable Stevenson came out and he's listen, still got beat. And still got beat. So, this is to come out and give you guys a little clarity and how we felt on the situation. You know, and I first and foremost, I would not like to see, anybody lose their eligibility. This was just clearly there was a lot of questions into how we felt and did we think there could be possible loss of eligibility. Um, and stuff like that. Would there be loss of eligibility? And some of the answers are if you have a bona fide contract, what, the payment beyond expenses for performance, stuff like that, that clearly goes into that pro zone, that professional athlete section. And that's something that, we really wanted to get. I wanted to answer everybody's questions because I understand, there were a lot of questions in regard to this. And I wanted to let everybody know we are going to answer it, but I do have to always give my notices of, hey, I'm not legal or NCAA compliance, advisor. I'm not anything like that. I strictly provide my opinion, and my opinion is not to be used in any proceeding because it is strictly an opinion. So, that's a thing that you look at. I want to be able to see real American freestyle, be able to have more NCAA athletes compete. Real good thing. I think Bo Bassett is a great wrestler. I think there's good things for Bo. I would hate to see anything go in the other way. And I know a lot of people were like, you think is Is there a possibility that this can come? It could happen, and it would be shocking for something like that to happen. But I don't think it is. I think in terms of it, you say you got to make sure you keep all the right parties involved to make sure there's no problem in any which way. You got to make sure you don't make any problem. I think if you follow the rules and stay in that area, it's real interesting. It's a real interesting sitch. Nobody wants to be in a situation like that where you find out that you may have risked eligibility. That's the worst thing. We know this problem has happened over the years. Um, guys who turned around and took money from the universities before you had NIL and all that stuff, where you have to have done that. And I think um, we've seen it happen where guys have lost final years of eligibility because stuff has come out. And it just was a real bad situation. There's countless football guys where it happened to them, and they lost their eligibility because when you were recruited, they bought you this, they bought you the car, they bought you that, and I think it really was a thing when I was in high school. I know it wasn't, when I was in high school, we were told that by the AD. The AD sat, most of the athletes down and said, hey, if you got universities offering to buy you cars, this and that, you need to tell them no. You're going to affect your eligibility. And I think that was a good conversation. I don't think they much do things like that anymore when it was big, but one of the things we wanted to for sure get across here is that you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you look at something and you say, well, oh, I'm in a very bad gray area now because I've now taken stuff I wasn't supposed to. And I think that's a fairly interesting thing. I think it's fairly interesting, but I think in any case, you don't want to see somebody lose their eligibility. You really don't. In sport of wrestling, we don't really have professional. Although they tried to last year consider Olympics as professional, and unfortunately they won't because listen, you have U17, you have U23, Worlds, and all of that. If you consider being an Olympic champ professional and all of that stuff professional, I get Olympics versus Worlds, but if you're considering that is a professional status, um, I think that a lot of people wouldn't be eligible, and I think there's a reasons why they didn't weigh in on the Gable Steepson situation. There's a clear reason why they didn't weigh in on the Gable Steepson situation because it just you go in that area where if you say Gable Steepson, then people are going to start talking about worlds and stuff like that. And I think there's clear situations where look, no matter what everybody felt Gable Steepson shouldn't have wrestled. Think about it this way: he did get beat. He got beat. He got beat. He did not end with an NCAA title. I get everyone would say, well, he's still an All-American, but he didn't get another NCAA title, and that should show you the case. And it just doesn't, and it just was real crazy to see something like that, see something of that nature happen, and be like, wow, this is real. This is real. So it's a real interesting sitch that to go through that, but still what an NCAA champ. The cover is being an NCAA champ. It's okay to be American and stuff like that, but the cover is being, don't get twisted, being an All American is still really good, but the cover is being being an NCAA champ, and if there's a second coveted thing, and it's becoming an All American. There are so many guys that you don't understand. Becoming a a multiple time All American is not easy. A lot of the people that understand the fans of wrestling might look and say, "Wow, look at how easy." When Spencer Lee was wrestling, how Spencer was going through the guys. It's not easy being an all. It's not easy to become All American status. Like you can look at some scrappy guys that you would have never thought was going to be. I got one for you. I got one for you, and I'm gonna see if I can remember his name, and if I can, I'm gonna bring it up. So let me see if I could find his name, and I will bring it up, and see if I could find his name, and I'll see and bring it up. It's a really good textbook case of it. So a lot of you might not agree with this, but I got you. I got you one that many would have said. Does anybody remember the 2022 NCAA championships All-American CJ Compusto? And I apologize if I've mispronounced that last name. Nobody expected CJ to become an All-American that year. I'm pretty sure it was that 2022 year. Nobody expected CJ to become an All-American that year. Like the way he scrapped back. If anybody's seen that, the way he scrapped back in that NCAA championship that year, I would, you know what? Might do me some good to pull it up. I'm gonna pull it up for you guys. Let me pull it up for you guys. I'm gonna pull it up for you guys. Okay, so we're kind of doing a little bit of a change here. We're talking Bo, but we're gonna really get on this, like the shocker. CJ Compusto was the 12 seed. He was the 12 seed. Took out the 5. Well, let's see. He was the 12 seed. Started off by taking out the 21 seed. You would expect that. Then took out the 5 seed. Then lost to Woods of Stanford. Okay, so where was the? I'm gonna get it for you. Turns around, beats Michich of Michigan. We all know Michich, good wrestler. He's 24 seed that year. Michich beats Michich, the 12. Beats Michich, 24 seed. Inside in victory. Then gets beat by Willis of Oregon State. But by that point, had already secured itself an All-American stat. Like, I remember watching that match. And they're like, wow. Like, you could hear the commentary. I think it was Daniel Cormier that year. You could hear him go, wow, CJ Compusto just became an All-American. Like, they were shocked. That's what I'm talking about. It's the shockfulness that, you could be Olympic champ. That don't mean you can't get beat. And that's why I say it's not easy to become All-American. But to wrap up that little CJ, since we brought up CJ, he also in 2025 became an All-American again, taking 4th place. So that's a good thing. This is a guy that has had a really good, you would say, resume when it comes to wrestling. To go through and do that, to go through and do that is a really good thing. Really, really good thing. For that, to have done that, that is a really good thing to have that happen. There's no better way to do that. So, we are yet again at the end of another epi. I just wanted to give you guys that. I hope it helped you guys understand a little more and how I felt about the Bassett Real American Freestyle. Listen, I don't want him to lose his eligibility. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. I don't want the kid to lose his eligibility. I want to see Bo wrestle because it's going to be good wrestling. I feel like we're getting another Spencer Lee here. And Spencer Lee was amazing to watch wrestle. So don't want to see kid lose his eligibility. I do have to give my final notice one more time because that is what I've been instructed by all the mentors to say. I am not a legal or NCAA compliance advisor. So this does not substitute for professional in any situation, professional counsel. The NCAA rules are detailed and can hinge on wording and fact patterns. But I hope that this video that I put out for you guys gives you a clear, structured briefing so that you can kind of have a rough way to move forward. I would always say here to reach out to any compliance you have with the NCAA before taking anything that may affect your eligibility, or even your school or anybody that's close enough that can make sure you get an answer without losing eligibility. I just have to say that just to let you know, I am not in no way, shape, or form. What I give on these episodes is my opinion. I do have to say that because that is what they, the mentors that I have wanted me to say, just to let everybody know I'm not advocating. I am not legal or a compliance advisor for the NCAA, so I cannot give you the full official what is supposed to happen. But I can tell you this is some sort of a feeling. So with that all being said, this is yet another episode of the Weigh-In podcast by Ben Watt Chestnut and the Pop-In Sebastian Romero. We are in what is the second to last month to this streak being officially continued, which is pretty crazy because we're always running the streak. But we are in wrestling season, so these off Colgate, not Colgate, collegiate, my bad, collegiate, these collegiate wrestling topic, these off-topic collegiate wrestling topics like this Bo episode and bringing up CJ, which is good topics, but we're going to start getting into some of the upsets and stuff like that of wrestling in the weeks now because we're here, wrestling's back, which is great. So, I'm already watching a ton of wrestling, because I get it going, after going and having a long day of work. I tell you, what I do here is I have my laptop. I got 2 laptops. I have my TV that I turn all of it on to different matches, and I really do watch match after match. And I really try to watch most of the matches as I can. I try to keep up with as many as I can because last year it was like I missed one match. I feel like I'm 6, 7, 8 matches behind because so much wrestling. So I do take a lot of my free time to get a lot of this wrestling done. But nonetheless, another epi of the Weigh-In. I hope this brought you some clarity. But that's it for this one. Weigh-In out.
The Weigh-In, where stories